Okay, it's 8:32. So what I'd like to do is I'm not sure who's all on the call, but I'd like to call the Planning Stakeholders Relations Committee meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the October 15 minutes. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Do I have a motion to approve those minutes, Stephanie?
So moved.
And I don't know, is Ann on the?
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
So
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, there are no resolutions on our agenda today, but we do have a project update from David Huffaker and Amy Silverman. So I see David there. Is Amy there also or not?
No, Amy's not here this morning. She's remote, and I'm actually going to take the lead on the presentation, hopefully to give her a break, because she's been doing a lot of online meetings, both for Next Transit and for the BRT project. So we'll see if I can make it through without calling my lifeline Amy.
Oh, so now we're the jokester, huh? Is that it? I'm supposed to be the funny guy here, by the way.
Okay.
Anyways, all right, David, you're up. Okay.
Good morning, Chair Tague and other members of the Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee. I am David Huffaker. I'm the Chief Development Officer, and I'm going to give you a brief update on the BRT project. We actually, as John said, we have a fairly light agenda today. But just a very brief update on the BRT project, and then I do have a couple other updates that are off agenda, but just would be sort of FYIs for you all regarding Next Transit and our annual service report. So just to sort of ground everyone on the BRT project, and we're trying to do these updates for the committee every other month or so, kind of generally depending on if there are project milestones. And so just to refresh your memory on the schedule, we're at the stage where we have completed the 90% design for the BRT project. As I mentioned the last time, we have been contacted and are starting to work with our project management oversight consultant. This PMOC is a representative of the Federal Transit Administration and is a key milestone for the project. This is the person who will, or the team that will evaluate the readiness of our project and our ability to receive the federal funding, which was announced earlier this year by the administration and the FTA. So this is a great opportunity for us to share the project. John, did you have a question?
No, I'm just nodding yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Then we also, just this week, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, we have embarked on a round of stakeholder engagement. We did an online meeting on Monday. We have another one on Thursday that I'll talk about. In 2021, things are really going to get busy, and it'll be pretty hectic, and we'll probably need to do more frequent updates for this committee, as well as seeing some actions go through the Performance Oversight Committee. We will embark on a round of general public engagement around the final designs of the project in early 2021, and by early, that's January, February timeframe most likely. We're still working through the pros and cons of some of these online engagements. And actually, I can talk about that on some of the later slides, so I'll just leave that there. But we're working hard to engage the public as much as possible. We will have various activities with the PMOC. Again, that's the Project Management Oversight Consultant, as they evaluate the financial plan, our resources dedicated to the project, right-of-way plans, our risk management strategies. We'll have a risk assessment workshop with them early this month, or I'm sorry, early in 2021. And that will go towards their evaluation of the project. I anticipate that they will allow for us to receive the federal funding in early to mid 2021, which will then allow us to bid and let the project contracts, both our construction management and our construction contracts. So those will be exciting milestones for us as well. Mike Cetra and his legal team continue to work through our right-of-way acquisition plan, and we've got a large number of parcels primarily related to temporary construction easements that we're working on securing with the property owners. There are limited property acquisitions that we need to make for the project, but that work is underway. As I said, once we begin the construction process late in 2021, then construction will be ongoing in 2022. I guess I should also not gloss over, we will be making bus procurements, particularly the battery electric buses as part of this project will occur late in 2021 as well. You'll see a lot of action on the roadways in 2022. Construction will be finishing up in 2023, and we anticipate revenue service beginning in late 2023. So as I mentioned, we have started a round of BRT stakeholder updates. We have some official stakeholder groups that we're partnering with. These are groups that represent communities throughout the downtown, uptown, Oakland, and the East End communities. And so we've got 2 public meetings that are being held online on Microsoft Teams. We did a Microsoft Teams live event. On Monday, we were welcomed by County Executive Rich Fitzgerald. We had Catherine Kellerman, our CEO, give us a few moments of welcome, and then engaged with about 60 individual stakeholders, plus a number of Port Authority staff. And you can see some pictures of the team in Catherine's office, which became our studio for the day. It was actually a really engaging conversation. People were able to ask questions through the chat function, and those questions ran the gamut from station design to operations with right turns and the bus lanes, what's the status of the bike lanes, utility work. It was quite a free-ranging conversation. So I was excited by the level of engagement that we saw on Monday. We do have another session this afternoon at 3:30. And so we're anticipating to get some more feedback from stakeholders at that point. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing a round of general public engagement in early 2021. We haven't worked out the details of when that's going to occur, but we will definitely put the word out and try to engage as many people as possible to give them a sense of where the project is going and let them weigh in on their thoughts around some of those fine details that will be in their purview. So that's kind of all I wanted to cover on the BRT project. Are there any questions or comments that I can address?
One comment. The structure of this now is we're at 90%, so I don't know exactly what that means. That means that there's 10% left. What type of changes can be made, if any, now? If in other words, if something comes up in one of our stakeholders meetings that we hadn't thought about, which I'd be surprised, but that we hadn't thought about, can you talk about that just a little bit, David?
Sure, I can speak to it, and maybe others can chime in if I misspeak. But as you imply, John, the ability of us to make major changes is very limited at this point without significantly impacting budget and schedule. We do believe that we've uncovered or identified any fatal flaws or any major flaws in the project, and we have been reaching out and working with various property owners and constituents and stakeholders throughout the process, and so there have been a number of conversations already underway around station locations and what the design looks like. So we have believed that we've identified any major issues. Of course, if something does get identified here and it requires us to evaluate the scope and schedule and budget, then that's something we would consider. We just need to recognize at this point that any major changes that occur would impact the timing and the cost of the project. But, at any point, if a change needs to be made, it could be made.
Right, and I implied that if some changes that might be made could have an impact on the cost of the project. I understand that. Also, I just wondered because we're kind of getting towards the end, and so changes being made at this time might be a little bit difficult. I'm also interested in. I understand that we have a point person at the city that we work with on this, because a lot of those properties, even out here in East Liberty where the 71B runs, I wondered about some of those stations that are going to be put in place. I wondered how they were going to work. But because, again, that involves a conversation with the city, right?
Yes. And so we've been working throughout. We've had engagement from city staff, particularly from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Right. And just in September, I believe it was, they did hire a full-time project manager to interface with our team and other city departments as well as the public. And so I feel pretty confident that the city will be able to address any of those particular right-of-way issues and some of the design issues that impact things like driveways, stations, and some of the public realm.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions? Ann, Stephanie, do you have any questions?
No questions for me so far, John.
I'm good.
Any other board members? I'm not sure who else is on. I see Michelle's on. And I'm not sure who's on the phone. But if there's no questions, what I'd like to do, David, is if there are any stakeholders, stakeholder groups in the meeting that have a question on the BRT, I'm not sure who might be on. Okay, seeing no questions from stakeholder group and from the board, you said you had a couple other things that you wanted to mention that are off agenda. I assume committee members, there's no problem with David putting these on the agenda.
No, David did a great job. Without Amy, David. Good job.
Okay.
Go ahead, David.
So thank you, John. So I do have two other items that I'd like to just give a very brief update on. As you know, we're in the midst of our next transit long-range planning process. And this is kind of a public service announcement, if I can claim a little advertising time. We're in the midst of our theme 3, which is how can transit get you there? And this is a part of a 6-theme planning process. The first 2 were confirming the benefits and barriers to transit, and then a theme of where do you want to go? So this theme of how can transit get you there is something that's really exciting for us. This is when you start to dream and put some ideas on paper and on maps and try to identify, hey, where would we want to go if we could take transit anywhere we needed to go in Allegheny County? Where would I take it? And so this is a process and a series of online meetings. On the slide here, you can see the dates. There's 2 meetings on the 18th of November, 1 on the 17th. But this will be a chance, again, for the public, and this is open to the general public, to weigh in on the how transit can get you to some of those locations. We really do want to get input from people in any way they can. If they can't attend one of these public meetings, we also have a public input site on the website at nexttransit.network. And if you haven't checked out that website, it's really fantastic, very interactive, very easy to follow, and it gives you much more detail on some of the themes that we've already worked through. We also, and I think Amy mentioned this last month or maybe the month before, we also have found that despite the pandemic, the use of pop-up tables around Allegheny County has been very effective. And so these are COVID safe, socially distanced, everyone's wearing masks, but it does provide another forum for people to be able to provide input. We will have a number of pop-up tables around Allegheny County. You can see a picture on the right there of one of our examples from earlier this year. And then there also will be Take One cards on the buses that will be another forum for riders to give us information about how transit can get them where they need to go. And of course, there's also phone lines for people to call in. So we're trying to be mindful of of the fact that not everyone can attend a public meeting online, and so give them lots of opportunities to give us feedback. And so I would encourage you, as you talk to your various constituents and stakeholders, to have them participate through one of these forums. So that's all I wanted to say on Next Transit. And then you may remember we sort of altered our schedule for the annual service report. Normally, we would have been bringing that annual service report to you this month. And this, as you can imagine, has been a very unusual year for our planning and our annual service process. And so we have spent much of this summer and fall working on our response to COVID-19. And again, I'll remind people that the November service change is one of our larger service changes that we've undertaken in the past decade that will refocus some of our service to local routes and coverage routes that are seeing ridership hold fairly steady by reallocating resources from some of the commuter routes that have not seen the ridership return. And so we're working, we actually are finalizing the draft of the annual service report right now, but rather than rush and try to squeeze it into the time frame of getting it to you this month, we want to provide enough time for both internal review and a chance to review with the ACTC, as well as giving you a chance to get a more full description, most likely in January. So if you were wondering, gosh, I thought we were going to be seeing the annual service report in November, that's why we're not bringing it to you this month. And frankly, that's why we have a relatively light agenda this month. But did want to assure you that you will still get a chance to see the annual service report. It's going to be an interesting document this year with all of the changes and uncertainty that's come from this COVID world. So hopefully it'll be an interesting process for you to review that annual service report, and we'll get that to you in January. So now with that, thank you for indulging me, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Just a quick question on the stops. Are we still doing that, or is that kind of been on hold a little bit? I'm not sure.
The stop optimization program has been put on hold. The last time we made changes was in March of this year, and that was right at the point that the world changed, and so we have been on hold since then. We do continue to track the data around those changes. It's a little bit difficult to come to conclusions because the ridership is so different and our service profile is so different, but I can say that we are on hold. We will re-engage when we're at a point where we can safely talk to people and trying to actually still determine what that engagement process would look like when we're looking at the next round of routes that we would like to look at some of the bus stop optimization.
Thank you, David. And Stephanie, any questions?
None for me.
I'm good, thank you.
Michelle?
Jessica's here, but I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. I'm good.
Oh,
Great
see,
job.
I see Jessica. Now I see you on there. Laura, I had asked earlier if there were any questions on the BRT. I don't know if you were on the call when I said that. Do you have any questions of David and anything that he said to date or today?
No, I don't have any questions right now. Thank you.
My only request, oh, sorry, did you say us or me or were you asking?
Go ahead, Laura.
My only request is that when the stop optimization process restarts, that we have a clear set of metrics from you all, as we had asked before, about what success looks like and what might result in another pause of the program or a reconfiguring of what the goals are. Because I think, as you know, we're concerned about how it limits access for people with disabilities and others.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. David, response?
Nope, thank you. I appreciate the feedback, Laura, and we certainly are continuing to refine how we communicate about the bus stop consolidation and optimization, and certainly defining success factors is a vital part of it. So we'll be continuing to refine that and work with the various stakeholders.
Thank you, David. If there's no further questions, just as a reminder, there will be no meetings in the month of December. Our next meeting will be, I think, the third Thursday in January. The next committee meetings for the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this morning, and we'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, so the meeting will stand in adjournment until January. So thank you very much. And next up, I think, Ann, your committee's up next, right?
Yep. Yeah, just give me a second to. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
We're having a technical issue. We're having a technical issue unmuting the board vice chair, Jennifer Liptak, and we're working on that right now. But she is in attendance, and we're working on getting her there, but she has been in attendance for this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make it clear, I've been in attendance too. Like, I'm just listed as Jeff on the screen.
I'm listed as John parentheses me. I'm not sure what that means. Anyways, all right. Sorry, Jeff. So anyways, Ann.
Okay, yeah, just give me a second here to pull up my agenda. And it's upside down. Here.
Michelle and I print our agendas. We're afraid that something will get screwed up.
Yes. Okay. So, all right, I will call to order the November 12th Finance Committee meeting. The first agenda item is approval of the minutes of the October 15th, 2020 Finance Committee meeting. Everyone had a chance to review those minutes. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
And do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Our only agenda item for today is a review of the October 2020 financial statements and cash flow. And so, Pete, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for October, our total operating income for the month was under budget by $5.7 million. And total operating income for the fiscal year is under budget by a total of $22.5 million. Every revenue category is below budget for both the month and the fiscal year. Passenger revenue and also access program service revenue constitutes the majority of the shortfall. And the shortfall is indirectly eligible for CARES Act financing. I should mention, and I will provide an update in January, that we prepared another CARES Act invoice for $4.8 million yesterday. So that will take our total of CARES Act usage up to about $36.3 million. And like I said, I will prepare an update on CARES Act usage for January, and we will probably submit a couple more invoices in between now and the January time horizon. So that would leave us with about $105 million of the $141.5 million in CARES Act funding. Next slide, please. So from a total expense and subsidy perspective, for the month of October, we were $3.7 million under budget in expenses. Total expenses fiscal year to date are $17.6 million under budget. Every expense category other than salary and wages are under budget through the first 4 months of the fiscal year. And just of note, every dollar that we're under budget, the authority will utilize dollar for dollar less of its $42 million in deferred revenue that was used to help balance the fiscal 2021 operating budget. Our total subsidy was $626,841 below budget for the month due to a shortfall in vehicle overhaul funding. The authority will not receive these funds without new state capital funding in fiscal 2021. About $6.5 million was budgeted in the 2021 budget for vehicle overhaul. Our total subsidy is $1.5 million above budget, and that is due to receipt of CARES Act funding. From a October year-over-year results perspective, our total operating income is $22.5 million below last fiscal year. Every revenue category is below last fiscal year. Passenger revenues are $20.4 million below last fiscal year, and access revenue is $776,260 below last fiscal year due to lower ridership from the pandemic. Total expense is $765,449 higher than last fiscal year, and that's due to higher wages, salaries, and employee benefits. Our subsidies are $2.3 million higher than last fiscal year, and this is principally due to additional CARES funding and also higher usage of preventive maintenance grant funding. If you look at our reserves, is there any way you can move that over a little bit, John? We began the month of October with $141.1 million in operating reserves. We had cash inflows of $29.5 million from passenger revenue and grant subsidies. We had cash outflows of $31 million for salary, wages, benefits, and payments to vendors for services performed. So we ended the month of October with $139.6 million in operating reserves. Are there any questions?
I don't think I have any questions, but thank you for mentioning the status of the cash reserves and how, I guess, the relationship of how our expenses are coming under for the year, and thus we're going to rely less on those cash reserves. So I appreciate that update. Does anyone else from the committee or the board have any questions for Pete?
I do not.
Okay. Seems like we're pretty much at the same place we were for the last couple of months as far as revenues and expenses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that's all we had on the agenda today. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? Thank you. We're adjourned, and we'll catch up in January. Thank you. Turn it over to Michelle.
But I think we're ready to go, so I'm going to call the Performance Oversight Committee to order. You have to excuse me a little second here. The dog jumped onto my desk and knocked my laptop over. So I think we're good. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so the Performance Oversight Committee is officially called to order. Our first item of business this morning will be approval of minutes of the October 15th Performance Oversight Committee. And barring, are there any questions or changes to the agenda for oversight? Okay, hearing no additions, changes, or anything else. If I could have approval of the minutes, please. Lori, are you able to?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second for approval of those minutes? Do we have Austin with us this morning? Representative Davis? Okay, I'm going to second that. All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Very good. Thank you. Moving on with our agenda. Good morning. Mr. Trona.
Good morning.
Is that you? Good morning. How are you doing?
Okay, we're ready?
I'm ready to proceed if you are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I have 5 items for your review and presentation to the full board for approval. The first, non-destructive testing of rail. All of our bids were advertised, e-business documents were distributed. And this bid, we had 3 firms accept the invitation and 2 bids are received for this contract over a 3-year period. It's our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsible bidder, which was Smith Emery Laboratories, an estimated amount of $186,342 over a 3-year period. This price represents a 4% increase from the previous contracted price. Number 2, Cummins ISB engine replacement parts. 5 firms accepted the invitation, 5 bids were received for these replacement parts over a 2-year period. The low bidder for 2 of the part groupings did not bid all items in the group as required and therefore ineligible for award. So our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsible bidders, which was Colonial Supply, 15 items, estimated amount of $468,333.85. Cummins, 2 items, estimated amount of $64,310. CBM US Inc., 1 item, estimated amount of $64,310. This price represents a 2% increase over the previous contracted price for these items 2 years ago. Number 3, fire alarm system testing and certification. 5 firms accepted the invitation, 5 bids were received for this certification over a 2-year period. Our recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low responsible bidder, which was Open Systems Pittsburgh, an estimated amount of $226,486 over a 2-year period. This price represents an 11% decrease from the previous contracted prices 2 years ago. Number 4, magnetic track brake suspension parts. 2 firms accepted the invitation, 3 bids were received for these track brake suspension parts over a 2-year period. The low bidder proposed items that were not in compliance with the technical specifications and therefore ineligible for award. So our recommendation that the contract be awarded to Hall Industries, estimated amount of $139,560 over a 2-year period. This price represents a 14% increase from the previous contracted price 2 years ago. Number 5, track switch heater overhead catenary line heaters. 4 firms accepted the invitation, 4 bids were received for these line heaters. Our recommendation that the contract be awarded to Omni Control Technology, 7 items, an estimated amount of $119,299.89. Mac Products, 3 items, estimated amount of $26,996. There's been no recent purchase of these items. However, the staff has determined the prices to be fair and reasonable. That concludes my report.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Trona. Do I have any questions from any of my committee members for Mr. Trona about any of these 5 items? I'm going to open up questions to any other board members. Do any other board members have questions for Mr. Trona on these 5 items?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I would ask Austin, if you're with us, to make a motion to move this forward to the full board for approval for next Friday's meeting. Okay, I'm going to move to Lori then. I don't think we have Austin on with us. Representative Davis, I don't think is here. So Lori, would you be able to make that motion for me, please?
So moved.
I'm going to second the motion. All in favor to move this forward to the full board, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. Motion carries to the full board. So thank you, Mr. Trona.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Moving on to item B, authorization to award construction contracts for the Manchester Garage Engine Test Facility Project. Mr. Keith Wargo, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm well. Good morning. Before I get started on the resolution, I just wanted to provide a brief explanation of what the engine test facility is all about. Manchester is our main shop, which completes, among other things, rebuilding bus engines. Engines are rebuilt at their midlife, which is about 250,000 miles, or if we have an engine failure. On average, they do between 40 and 60 engine rebuilds a year. And then once the engine's rebuilt, the mechanic can then put it into the test unit and actually test the performance of the engine before it actually is installed in a bus. So the picture you see there is the existing facility, which we want to replace. So with that being said, this resolution would authorize the authority to enter into 4 construction contracts, a general, a mechanical, a plumbing, and an electrical for construction of a new engine test facility at our Manchester garage. The general construction work includes, but is not limited to, demolition of the existing room and construction of a new engine test room, including the test equipment. The H or mechanical construction work includes, but is not limited to, demolition and construction of HVAC, air handling, cooling towers, and associated controls for the test facility. The plumbing construction work includes, but is not limited to, modifications to a wet piping sprinkler system, hot water and cold water system, waste oil system, and compressed air system. And finally, the electrical construction would do electrical work associated with both the HVAC and the equipment installation. Bid documents were prepared and publicly advertised, and 5 bids for the general construction, 4 bids for the mechanical construction, 4 bids for the plumbing construction, and 7 bids for the electrical construction were received and opened on September 4th. After review of the bids by authority, staff, and legal counsel, it has been determined that the bid of Yarborough Development, Inc. in the amount of $1,263,307 for the general construction, the bid of R&B Mechanical, Inc. in the amount of $346,500 for the mechanical construction, the bid of First American Industries, Inc. in the amount of $424,900 for the plumbing construction, and the bid of R.E. Yates Electric, Inc. in the amount of $164,000 for the electrical construction are the lowest responsive bids from responsible bidders, meeting the authority's specification for the project, and the prices are fair and reasonable. If there are no questions, I respectfully request the Performance Oversight Committee recommend approval of this resolution to the full board, awarding the 4 contracts to these companies and the respective bid amounts.
Thank you, Mr. Wargo. Do I have any questions or comments for Mr. Wargo from any of my committee people?
Yes, this is Lori. This is kind of a related question, but once the engine is rebuilt, approximately how many miles then does it run after that procedure?
Well, I mean, Dawn probably can answer this a little better, but what we do is midlife. We're looking for an expectancy on the engines of about 500,000 miles on average. So we do a midlife, and that's kind of what the expectancy is on the life of the engine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do I have any questions, Mr. Wargo, or comments from any of the other board members?
Yeah, I have a question, Keith. We'll be able to do battery electric buses there too, right?
I'm not sure that, because those are actually engines, John. Those are not are motors, John. They're not engines. So we'd have to do a separate test stuff. But yeah, this is the diesel engines that we would be testing.
Well, I was thinking about being a multi, and I was get the most bang for your buck if you could do battery electric buses also. That's where my question was going to.
Yeah, this is more set up for a diesel engine, John. It's a dynamometer, so it tests the performance of that. We actually hook it up to the engine, and then it tests the engine through the performance.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
You're welcome.
Okay, hearing no other questions, Lori, Could I have an approval, please, to move, or a motion to move this forward to the board meeting on Friday? Representative Austin, are you here with us yet?
Thank you.
No. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
Michelle, this is Jeffrey, if I may interject real quick.
Yes.
Austin, if you dialed in on the phone at the very beginning, please just disconnect and recall in. I don't know if he's on or not, but I can't unmute the call-in folks.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay. I'm going to second that motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries to the full board. So I thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Huffaker. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Michelle. I just wanted to jump in here. This is a little off script, but as I have let you know, Michelle, but I don't know that the rest of the board is aware. Keith Wargo will be retiring after 3 decades of service to the Port Authority. And so this is the last action he will ever present to the Performance Oversight Committee. And we've estimated that over his 30 years, he's done more than 100 actual resolutions, not to mention that each resolution might have multiple contractors, and then a number of other actual updates and general project updates to the board. Of course, during his time, the highlight was the North Shore Connector, but I think it's actually kind of fitting that the last action he takes is the Manchester garage engine test facility, because this is the kind of work that Keith does on a daily basis. He keeps the Port Authority running, and I'm really proud of the work that he's done. I've gotten to know and trust him immensely over my 2 years here at the Port Authority, and I know that he cares very strongly that we continue to maintain a state of good repair for our facilities, and I just wanted to recognize his service.
Yay! Thank you, Keith.
Congratulations.
Hey, Michelle, it's John. I think it can't be understated the value that Keith has been to the authority. I'm sorry to see you retiring, but that's inevitable that people are going to retire. So, Keith, on a personal note, I'll miss your expertise on our board meetings, and good luck with your retirement.
Thank you, John. I just want to thank the board. They've always been very supportive. I've had a great team in engineering to work with, as well as just all the departments at the authority. Just a dream job. I've had a lot of great opportunities with both big and small projects, and I will miss it and the people, but I'm going to enjoy my retirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much.
Happy retirement.
Keith has been so wonderful on giving board members tours. He has been very gracious with me, learning out and about. And I had a very thorough visit to the Manchester garage, so I know exactly what we're going to be demolishing and replacing with that. So congratulations, Keith. Thank you for everything. Okay, good morning. How are you doing, Inez? Good to see you. You're going to do an authorization to enter into agreements to provide employee benefits consulting services.
Hey, I'm sorry. Before you start, this is Rep Davis. Hey, I just had to jump on for a minute. I'm in Harrisburg for leadership elections, so I'm not going to be able to stay on for this meeting. But I heard you guys were asking for me, so I just wanted to pop on and say I'm not going to be able to participate today.
Thank you. I saw you pop on, so thank you, Representative. Good luck and do a great job as usual.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. I'm here today to present 2 resolutions for which I am seeking your approval. And as indicated earlier, one is for the Employee Benefits Consulting Services. RFP number 2008 for said service was publicly advertised, and an informational meeting was held on September 1, 2020. The services include, but are not limited to, performing strategic planning of employee health and welfare programs, providing underwriting analysis and actuarial services to estimate benefit costs and its impact on the impact of said modification to our costs, analyzing claim experience and its financial impact, assisting in procuring benefit services from vendors, and in post-award management, providing general administrative support, assisting to ensure that Port Authority is compliant with benefit laws, and finally, perform special projects and other additional services. 3 proposals were received and evaluated, and Willis Towers Watson US LLC is recommended for an agreement award with an initial term of 3 years plus 2 option years to be exercised at Port Authority's sole discretion, and the total not to exceed amount is $825,000. Are there any questions? If not, Madam Chair, I respectfully request your approval of this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Colon. Any questions from any of our board members, either on the committee or any of our board members in general, for Ms. Colon on this motion?
At this time.
Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to move this forward to the full board meeting for next Friday? Lori, I think you're on.
So moved.
I'm going to second that motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries for moving it on to forward to the full board meeting on Friday. The next item that we have is item D, authorization to extend and amend agreement with commercial consulting to provide drug and alcohol compliance program services. Ms. Colon, you're still on.
Great. September 2017, we issued RFP number 1708 for said services. And in January 2018, the board authorized us to enter into an agreement with commercial consulting for an initial 3-year term with 2 Port Authority option years with a not to exceed amount of $1,327,300. This agreement is going to expire February 28, 2021. And the staff recommends at this time that we exercise the first year so that this agreement will then expire February 28, 2022 with no increase to the not to exceed amount. Unless there are any questions, Madam Chair, I respectfully request that you approve this resolution.
I have no questions for you on this. Any other board members? Representative Ms. Gorski, anybody have questions or comments on this for Ms. Colon? JT, no questions, or did we shut off your microphone?
No questions.
Okay, great. All right. So I would ask for a motion to move this forward to our full board meeting next week.
So moved.
I'm going to second that motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Colon.
Thank you. Have a good
day. Thank you. Our next item, E, is authorization to extend and amend agreement to provide management care services. Mr. Mike Stetra, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning, Madam Committee Chairwoman. I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members, I have one resolution for your consideration this morning. This resolution would authorize Port Authority to extend and amend our current agreement with UPMC Work Partners for the continued provision of managed care services. In October of 2014, Port Authority issued RFP number 1407 to identify a firm to provide these services. Our managed care services include a variety of treatment facility services, on-site medical case management services, claims management and litigation support services, all of which help Port Authority to maintain our self-insured status for third-party liability and workers' compensation purposes. More recently, in this calendar year, under this contract, our nurse case managers have provided us critical support, tracking and managing our COVID-19 related employee cases and return to work clearances. So these services, have become even more critical for us this year. Following the RFP process, the board authorized the award of the agreement to UPMC Work Partners for an initial term of 5 years with 2 Port Authority optional extension years. The total authorized not to exceed amount for this agreement is $3.5 million. In November of 2019, the board authorized the exercise of the first option year to extend the contract 1 year with no increase in the not to exceed amount. Staff is now recommending and requesting that the board exercise the second option year to extend the term of the agreement for one additional year through January 31st, 2022, with no increase in that originally authorized not to exceed amount of $3.5 million. I'd also note we're anticipating a 5 to 8% DB utilization if the final year of the contract is exercised. UPMC Work Partners has identified an additional DB firm to provide us with some, supplement some of our off-site case management services as we continue to be on staggered schedules, including with our UPMC nurse case managers. Subject to any member questions, I would respectfully request that the committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Seffer. Any questions from any of our board members? Hearing no questions, please have a motion to move this forward to the full board, please. Lori, are you still here with us?
If you did hear me, so moved.
Thank you. Second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries, and we'll take that to the full board. Thank you, Mr. Seffer.
Thank you.
So we're continuing with item 3 then on our agenda, which is the annual PennDOT Rail Transit Safety Review.
Yes, good morning again, Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members. Just briefly, did just want to provide a brief introduction. As members are aware, on an annual basis, we have representatives from our PennDOT Rail Transit Safety Review Program, our designated state safety oversight agency who oversees our rail and fixed guideway safety, present to the board on, basically a year in review, a snapshot of safety activities over the past year. Hopefully next year we'll be able to have them join us in person again. This year we have our PennDOT representatives online to present to members. And I'd just like to briefly introduce Beth Panini, who is our PennDOT program manager. And she will be providing, I believe, an opening, and also have some assistance from April Dorchek, who is with Transportation Resource Associates, who is the consultant that works with PennDOT to help manage the program across the Commonwealth. So with that, I'll turn it over to Beth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time. Could everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for taking time and allowing us time on your schedule to present a year in review, as Mike said, of state safety oversight. First, I wanted to thank the team. We've had a lot of cooperation. We do this on an annual basis, and I feel like we're always saying the same thing to you, but I really want to reiterate the cooperation that we do receive from the staff at the Port Authority. They are phenomenal to work with. Bert Jennings and his entire team, and Chief Porter and the police force. We've really developed a great relationship over the years where we have a trusting, cooperative relationship, because we all know the end game is safety and making sure that we have a safe and efficient program. So with that, do we have our slides up? Thank you. If you could go to the next slide. All right, so this is our agenda. We're going to go over some of the activities that we've conducted over the past year. We have a MAP 21 SMS updates at Safety Management System. I know that we've talked to you about safety management systems in some of our prior presentations. The COVID-19 updates, we're going to talk to you about our audits and any accident reporting and investigations, and really what our current initiatives are and what we're tracking. But if you have any questions, please ask throughout the presentation. And again, we formally present to you on an annual basis, but if there are any questions that you might have for us throughout the year, please get in touch with me. If you can't get in touch with me for some reason, please reach out to Bert or Mike, and they'll make sure that they get in touch with me to answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to turn things over to April, and we'll get into it.
Sure. Thanks, Beth.
This slide probably looks familiar to some of you, but just to refresh, this kind of depicts what the RTSRP does as an oversight agency to fulfill our responsibilities. If you start kind of around the 9 o'clock area, on an annual basis, the RTSRP reviews and approves the changes of safety and security plans, and we also review revisions to SOPs and other manuals produced by Port Authority. We also oversee the safety certification for major projects. Okay, moving kind of up into about 12 o'clock now. The RTSRP performs independent audits of Port Authority's compliance with our program requirements, as well as with their own plans, rules, and procedures. We do this through documentation, reviews, interviews with Port Authority personnel, and field assessments. We also issue reports of our results and work with Port Authority on the implementation of any corrective action plans. When we can, we participate in or observe Port Authority internal audits, and if we can't actually participate in them, we always review the reports and any corrective actions that come out of them. Kind of down around 3, 4 o'clock now. We report annually to the FTA on the status of all of our agencies. And then our governing document that we use is our procedures and standards. We review and update that annually with feedback from all of our transit agencies that we oversee. And then we monitor the hazard management and agency SMS, and we're responsible also for investigation into accidents, incidents, and hazards. You can move to the next slide, please.
April, before you continue, I just want to emphasize that safety is the responsibility of the Port Authority. Our responsibility, as April went through those oversight activities, is we oversee what the Port Authority is doing. So, and then we are overseen by the Federal Transit Administration. So again, we're not the ones walking the track and checking your signals. We are auditing and making sure that based on the documentation that April just went over, that those things are being done by the Port Authority staff as per the procedures that are outlined that we've reviewed. But we are not the ones actually doing all of the safety elements within the system. We are the oversight entity. I always like to stress that. Thank you, April.
Thanks, Beth. So this next slide goes through the MAP 21 and SMS updates. So the RTSRP was certified under 674 in April of 2018. And then, of course, the big focus this year was 673. They'll approve the P 28th, and it was officially approved by the RTSRP on July 9th, which was ahead of the FTA's deadline of July 20. And the next steps for Port Authority are to put together an implementation plan for SMS, which they're actively working on, and this, of course, is going to be an ongoing process. Part 672 states that both the state safety oversight agencies and then the transit agency personnel who are responsible for safety at the agency must receive their PTS CTP, and this must be refreshed every 2 years. And Port Authority has chosen to use an SSO 101 training that the RTSRP put together to qualify as their recertification. So we provided that to 2 members of system safety this year, so they were able to receive their recertifications, and then also to 3 of Port Authority's safety consultants.
I want to give a huge shout out to the Port Authority and to all of you on the board and the executive staff for being the first of our 3 transit agencies within the state of Pennsylvania to have an approved PTASP. That is, it is a huge accomplishment, and it was a lot of work. So we want to recognize that work and make sure that you all know that you were the first RTA in Pennsylvania to get certified. And again, we really appreciate all of your hard work to get that done.
Hey, Beth, it's John. Does that mean more money for us?
Keep dreaming, John.
Good question.
Yeah, no, it just means that you're not going to, you'll be certified. So, and the certs and assurances that folks at Port Authority have to sign in order to receive their federal money, it just means that you'll be able to sign those certs and assurances, which is a big deal because if you can't sign the certs and assurances, you don't get any federal funds. So maybe not more money, but it allows you to get money. But good try, John.
Good answer.
Can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we could talk a little bit about COVID-19. As we know, there was a statewide shutdown of all non-essential businesses in the middle of March. And then on April 1st, Governor Wolf issued a stay-at-home order for the state. I just want to, again, kind of reiterate best thanks to Bert and Chief Porter, along with, everything else safety related. They've been great with keeping us very well informed of Port Authority's response to the pandemic. Letting us know, what they've been doing, the actions that they've been taking throughout, such as the driver shields installed on all the vehicles, all the mask requirements, temperature screening, the disinfection and cleaning of all the facilities and vehicles, the contact tracing efforts. They've been great keeping us informed with all of that information. And then we know, that Port Authority's COVID task force and maintenance personnel continue to meet regularly. And COVID-19 is also discussed at the safety meetings that Bert runs. As an oversight agency, we postponed all of our field activities beginning in early March or mid-March. And we also put together a safety plan to describe how we could kind of continue to conduct oversight activities while maintaining safety for ourselves and our agencies. We also wanted to make sure that we were limiting the burden on the agencies while they work to maintain their essential services, because we appreciate that this has been a really challenging time for all of, Port Authority and every agency that we oversee. When Allegheny County moved into the yellow phase of reopening, System Safety invited us back on site to start to resume some on-site audits and other activities such as ops reviews, some meetings, following, of course, all the protocols that were put in place by the agency. When I say they invited us back on site, I should say they invited myself back on site because I'm from within the county. So they're still, of course, keeping folks that were outside of Allegheny County out at the time.
April, I do want to mention something before you go on that, again, as Bert has been really focused on the COVID-19 response for the Port Authority, I think he deserves credit, not just for doing that, for making sure that he has built his team up in order to take over his other responsibilities that he was doing, and to give a shout out to Chad Snyder too, because it's really important to have a great team that you work with. So if something like this or anything else happens where you need to step out and your primary role is focused on now COVID-19, that he now has, he's done a really great job at working with his team and building them up, that they could take over a lot of responsibilities for him while he concentrates on the COVID-19 response. So I think Bert deserves some credit for that, and Chad also deserves some credit for being able to step up into that role.
Beth, if I could, just for 1 second, interrupt. I appreciate your kudos, and Chad Snyder and Chief Porter have also helped immensely in the COVID-19, but the number one guy, and I want to make sure he's recognized, is Mike Cetra. The guy literally works 18 hours a day, and he's done a super job of leading the whole overall team amongst all departments. And I just want to throw that in there. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Bert, for saying that. We get to work directly with you and with Chad and Chief Porter, and so thank you so much for recognizing all of Mike's efforts as well.
All right, thanks. This next slide that you have up shows our triennial audits at Port Authority. We are anticipating to complete 5 safety audits by the end of the year. We've completed 2, the Monongahela Incline and the Operations Training Audit. And we have scheduled throughout the end of the year power, vertical transportation and maintenance training. We've also completed 2 audits of the SEPP, System Description and Management Activities, this year. Can move on to the next slide. We did. This shows the event reporting. So Port Authority this year had a total of 18 accidents and incidents as of the end of October. 15 were on the light rail system, 2 on the busway, and 1 on the inclined plane. This slide kind of shows Port Authority's total as a percentage of all of our agencies. And then the next slide shows a graph of the annual events at Port Authority from 2016 to 2020. And there's a bit of a spike in 2019, as you can see here. A lot of this was due to some changes in event reporting criteria. After the release of Part 674, we had changed the event reporting criteria a couple of times, and that's kind of why you see a little bit of a spike there in 2019. We can move on to the next. So these are the highlights throughout the year. One I wanted to mention was the camera project that was completed in September. Big, security project. There was the installation of the cameras at all the high rail stations and along the busway. Another highlight for Port Authority was grade crossing upgrades. I think about 15 have been completed, and there are 7 more planned by the end of the year. The ATS system upgrade is still moving forward with the final design expected in November, and proof of concept testing is ongoing currently. And then the Silverline signals and key by hazard analysis has been another big initiative that we've been working with Port Authority on throughout this year. Can move on to the next slide. These are just some current and ongoing initiatives from this year and going forward. Of course, we mentioned SMS implementation, and Port Authority, Bert and his team have already put a lot of things in place, such as improved hazard reporting methods, hotline, anonymous reporting system, and they're planning to focus next on SMS training early next year with their consultant. And I mentioned again the safety certification for the ATS upgrade. And we have, from the RTSRP side, we've put together a risk-based assessment program as a way to evaluate our own SMS implementation. So that's currently under development, and we are tracking KPIs for things such as corrective action plans, audits, findings, and operational reviews. And then, of course, we'll continue to work with Bert and Chief Porter on the ongoing COVID-19 response. And with that, as Beth mentioned, anything you ever need, any questions, comments, you can always contact Beth or myself. And that's our contact information.
And again, I think on behalf of the RTSRP team at PennDOT, we wanted to also make sure that we congratulate and thank Mr. Wargo for all of his hard work and efforts that he did in support of safety during his career. So we will miss you, but we're also really, really happy that you get to enjoy retirement. So thank you for everything.
That is so great. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, April. That is so super, and very kind words for everyone. It's always good to hear that Chad Snyder and Chief Porter and Bert heading up that team over there, and credit for Mr. Setter, because yes, he absolutely has been working, and all of you have done great for the response. And Keith Wargo has a long career of great safety records, and I will miss him greatly, and we appreciate everything that you've done, Keith. So anyone have any final comments, any questions that you need to make at this point? Because that brings us to the end of our agenda this morning for the Performance Oversight Committee. Any questions from anyone? Okay, we were at the end of our agenda, and so our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, Bert.
Thank you. Thank you to all. Thank you very much.
It's John. So the meeting is adjourned. The Financial Audit Committee, that's next.
Yes. So
it doesn't look like Jim Brewster's on the call. Jeff Wentworth's still on?
John, I am on the call.
Oh, okay, good. I wasn't sure. I didn't see you.
Are you going to run this? No.
but I'm hoping that Jeff or someone will chair the meeting if they don't mind, since I'm not on Zoom here.
Sure, Senator, no problem. I'm here.
Thank you, Jeff.
No problem. Or I'll even start my video. Okay, let's call the meeting of the Financial Audit Committee to order. I think the only action item is approval of the audit report. Is somebody making a presentation, Pete, or is it?
Yes, Chairman. We have Dave Duzel and Dustin Starr from Mayor Duzel Auditing Company, and they have prepared some slides for your review, and then after that I will read the resolution for your consideration. So I will turn it over to Dave Duzel.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for meeting with us this morning. We're here to present the results of our audit of the financial statements for the period ended June 30th, 2020. In this time, we were able to complete the audit through a combination of on-site work and remote work. But thanks to Pete and his staff for all their help through the process and accommodating us, getting us the information we needed. On our slides today, we'll talk about some required audit communications, some financial highlights, and some upcoming accounting changes. Next slide, please. The reports that we issue include the authority financial statements, the single audit, which is a reports on compliance and internal control related to your federal funding. We also issue a written version of these slides that goes through some of the things I'll talk about this morning. A management letter, schedules required by PAT and the National Transportation Database, or not by PAT, but by PennDOT. And we do separate audits of the pension plan financial statements. I won't read this whole slide, but what it says is that the financial statements are the authority's responsibility. Our job is to perform tests of transactions, evaluate systems that you have in sufficient depth for us to be able to express an opinion on the financial statements. The single audit piece of it involves similar tests of compliance and internal control, and we issue opinions related to compliance and internal control in relation to the single audit. Next slide, please. We do not audit some of the additional information, but we look at it in relation to the audit that we do of the financial statement. Next slide, please. Some of the significant estimates that are inherent in your financial statements result in the net pension liability, the post-employment benefits liability, and certain claims and settlements. The estimates that relate to the pension and OPEBs are actuarially related. They deal with interest rates, discount rates, investment earnings, and pension and OPEB experience. Next slide, please. All records that we requested were freely available for our inspection. As I mentioned, thanks to everyone who assisted us, and no material audit adjustments were reported. Our reports were unmodified for both the authority and each separate pension plan, as well as our reports related to the single audit disclosed no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, and we had an unmodified opinion on compliance. Dustin's going to take over from me and talk about some of the financial highlights.
Okay, thanks, Dave. The one thing that I wanted to mention was with the single audit, there was an additional federal program that was audited this year, and that's the Corona Relief Fund. So there was approximately $9 million that was received from Allegheny County. that was considered to be a completely new federal stream that came through this year and was required to be audited along with the FTA funds that are received and routinely audited as part of the single audit. So with both of those programs, we did not come across any compliance issues or internal control issues. So that's great news, especially when you have a new program. The Coronavirus Relief Fund is entirely new to all local governments and nonprofits, but we did not come across anything that required any type of compliance or internal control findings. So to touch on the summary of the financial statements, here is a slide showing 2020 and 2019. This includes the changes in the balance sheet activity. I wanted to focus on the total net position. Net position as of 2020, 159 billion. These are in thousands. Decrease from 2023 for 2019. So the net position does continue to decrease from one year to the next. But as you can see, approximately 980 million shown as unrestricted. That is really the offset from the pension and OPEB liabilities. So we have some slides that we're going to go through to kind of walk you through how you're made whole through operating subsidies. The GAAP presentation is required for you to include those significant estimates that Dave discussed. However, they're not on the same level that you are used to seeing from a budgeting standpoint. Those are long-term liabilities that will continue to change based off of all the actuarial assumptions for the pensions, specifically how well the investments are performing. So when I get to that slide, you can kind of see how this deficit is continued to be made whole from one year to the next. The change from 2020 to 2019 on the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes, you can see that operating loss was significantly more than 2020, and that is because of the operating revenues. Ridership was down due to the pandemic. But if you look at the non-operating section, which is including the operating subsidies, that's increased significantly from 2019 to help balance that deficit. So within the presentation that's required under generally accepted accounting principles, the operating versus non-operating is how it's required to be broken out. But really, in that non-operating section is how you're made whole from an operating standpoint, is those operating subsidies that are received from PennDOT, from the FTA, and from the county. We can move on to the next one. So here's the slide that kind of breaks out how the operating loss is made whole from one year to the next. So if you look at how on the generally accepted accounting policy basis, your operating loss at year end was approximately $500 million. If you back out all of the non-cash items that I discussed with OPEB and pension, as well as depreciation, you're then down to a loss of only 346 million. And then here are the pieces, the operating grants that are used to balance that, which equal that loss of 346 million. A couple new things to touch on for 2020. There's CARES allotment of funding that's received during 2020. The capital used for operating CARES of 31 million is coming through the FTA. It's not considered to be part of that Corona Relief Fund that I talked about with the single audit portion. This is just an additional allotment of money that is being used along with the normal federal stream of money that you've received in the past, just an additional allotment that's helping offset that decrease in ridership. The local section, the CARES, the 9 million, that is considered to be the new federal program that we did audit for 2020. And that was to help offset additional costs that were incurred, such as cleaning buses, additional public safety staff, and so forth. So if you see here, your capital used for operating 59 versus 61 last year. So if we didn't have the pandemic, if we didn't have the decrease in ridership, the capital used for operating would have been relatively significant from one year to the next. And really that additional 31 is where you're seeing the allotment coming in from the FTA to help offset that large decrease in ridership from 2020 to 2019 related to the pandemic. Next slide. Unearned revenue, so the operating assistance that's received from PennDOT, there is an accounting policy that any operating assistance that you receive in excess of your normal operating revenue and expenses is required to be deferred. So what that means is you can't recognize all of the cash that you received. You can only receive, or you can only recognize the cash as revenue up to the operating expenses that were incurred. So this is kind of a running total from 2012 up to 2020. And you can see that for 2020, it's a very small sliver compared to what it's been in the past. So for several years, your allotment of operating funds from PennDOT have exceeded expenditures. And that fund has continued to grow to approximately $133 million from 2012 to 2020. For 2020, it's a very small sliver. Only approximately 1.3 million was deferred because of that decrease in ridership. So in the past, you've had increased ridership. You had to defer more money for the following year. This year, ridership was down. You were able to recognize more of the cash that you received to help offset the fact that your operating revenues were down. Within the financial statements, there's 160,000 or 160 million of unearned revenue presented, and there are the other items there at the bottom in that red box that make up that 160, with which I mentioned the 133 being the largest portion of unearned revenue related to PennDOT operating funds. Next slide, please. The net pension liability found within the financial statements, these are the 3 plans that make up that net pension liability. So if you add those 3 together, it will agree to the balance sheet reported under the net pension liability. This is net of the plan investments. So this is not the overall liability. It's offset. Those received, or those amounts will significantly change from one year to the next. In 2020, they are going down because of the investments having positive returns compared to 2019. It was also an actuarial year, so every 2 years, the Port Authority goes under a actuarial study. A new report is issued, and any change in the actuary's assumptions, any changes to the experience of the plan, as well as those investment earnings changing from one year to the next, you'll see some significant changes in this liability. Next slide, please. The sensitivity of the net pension liability in the discount rate. So the discount rate is essentially what is being used to evaluate the overall liability. That discount rate is around 7%. It varies between the different plans, 7.5%. So if investment returns are in excess of that 7.5%, it will significantly decrease the liability. And that's actually what we saw in 2020. The current rate at 7.5%, you can see in the middle of this graph what that liability would be if investments performed at 1% less. It would increase, and then if the actual investment return was greater than the 7.5%, your liability would then go down. Next slide, please. The planned net position as percent of total pension liability. So you can see the percentages from 2020 to 2019 increasing because the net position, the planned net position, essentially the value of the investments that are held in trust to pay pension liabilities, increased significantly from 2020 to 2019. So that ratio of what you have in your investment funds versus what the liability is has increased. Next slide. Moving on to the OPEB liability, so a completely different category now. It's treated essentially the same rules as the pension liability. But OPEB is any insurances or any other post-employment benefits that are available to retirees. This plan is not required to have a trust, and there is no trust to pay these liabilities. So what you're looking at now is just the liability. There are no funds set aside to fund these plans. However, you're continuing to be able to meet the cash requirements from one year to the next, meaning you're paying as you go, as the individuals retire and they start to use the benefits that they have earned. You make those payments and you're able to budget that more on a year-to-year basis rather than long-term. Next slide. This slide, kind of the same idea as the pension slide. However, now we're looking at the medical cost trend rate. So as things would become more expensive, of course, your liability is going to go up. If it becomes less expensive, the liability would go down. Next slide. Lastly, some up and coming changes. In 2020, due to the pandemic, the Government Accounting Standards Board, who is the board setting agency that sets all of the accounting standards that the Port Authority must follow. Due to the pandemic, they allowed everyone to the option to forego any of the up and coming changes that would have been in effect for 2020. All of that's been forgiven for an additional year, and in some cases, a year and a half. The big one that I just wanted to touch on is the fiduciary activities, the one at the very top. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we issue a separate audit report for each of the pension plans. So any type of plan that has a trust is required to now be included within the financial statements of the Port Authority. So the current reporting framework is that you have a separate audit for the Port Authority, you have a separate audit for each pension plan, and they don't commingle in terms of the information that's reported on the financial statements. There's footnote disclosures that are required. If you look at the financial statements, the pension information is not in there other than the liability. This standard is going to require for you to bring that financial information onto the financial statements of the authority and show as a separate fund or a separate strip within each of the financial statements. So this is a pretty big change for authorities. Now, if local governments such as counties, boroughs, townships were required to report this information in the past, this is a way of now authorities having to kind of conform to that same idea of reporting all of their trustee funds, their fiduciary funds within their financial statements. I think that is it for the highlights. Our contact information here. Any questions for Dave and I with the results of the audit?
It's John. A question I have goes to the OPEB liability. Is because you said there's no trust, so there's no money set aside for that. It's done on an annual budgeting basis. I was a little bit concerned about that.
That's correct. That's how a lot of governments have operated with those liabilities. They weren't even accounted for up until a few years ago. As long as you're operating, it's part of your budget. If you ever had a reduction of staff or stopped operating, then it becomes something that would have to be addressed. Some governments have started to move towards funding that. It's a matter of finding the money to do that.
Thanks, Dustin.
Any questions from the other committee members? Any of the board members? Okay, then I think we have a motion now, which is to authorize the presentation to the full board for approval, and so I would solicit a motion for that authorization for that. And can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thanks again to Mara Dussel for their work year in and year out for us. There is no other business of the Financial Audit Committee, so with that, the meeting will stand adjourned, and I think that's the last meeting today. There's no meeting of the Technology Committee, so with that, I'll look forward to seeing everybody at the board meeting, I guess a week from Friday.